Cafe Luna, Seasons of Adventure, Volume 1, by Lux Lucerne. Chapter 13. The tension in the room was thick with wonder of vision sparks and anxiety of the future. Beams of light clashing with tendrils of dark. Hope, despair, uncertainty. Though none of these things concerned a certain critter. The silence was broken, not with conversation, but with a little yawn from a sleepy cat. Luffy had finished resting in Lunania's lap, and the things that they had just discussed no longer concerned him. Meow, Luffy said, sounding like a small baby. He pressed his face against Lunadia's soft belly and stretched out his paws around her as best he could. The tension in the room melted away, as for the time being, they were in the presence of a particularly fluffy cat who had not a care in the world. "Oh, Luffy, such a good boy," Lunadia said with a smile. "I suppose there isn't much point in worrying about the hazy future in front of us. I'll just take things one step at a time, right, Zeph?" He nodded and smiled. Then that smile turned to a smirk, as something important popped into his mind. "Well, my dear Luna, the next step after dinner is naturally," Zephyrard said, awaiting her response. "Oh!" She perked up in her chair, forgetting all her worries. "Dessert, of course. Did you bring something good?" He chuckled smugly as he started to rummage through his bag. With utmost care, he picked up a package and unwrapped layer after layer. When there was but one layer left, there was a faint glow shimmering just beneath the surface. "Well, not your typical dessert in Pletufia," Zephyrard said, holding the round package in his hand. "But it's a little something special I picked up along the way, and I expect it's going to be delicious." He placed the small package in the center of the table. Both Lunadia and Nixia leaned forward with curiosity. It was about the size of a coconut, round, but it had that faint glow from underneath its covering. "I only have one, so I haven't tried it out myself yet, though I think you'll both be very keen to have a taste," Zephyrard said. He leaned over the table, undid the tie on the last layer of wrapping, then peeled it away. "I think this is what Auburn was seeking from the Kalian Isles." Everyone's eyes went wide as their breath was taken away by the beauty of what lay before them. Even Luffy poked his head over the edge of the table to see the commotion. The room was filled with a soft light, like the sun trickling through curtains on a warm day, emanating from the fruit that now sit in the middle of the table. The fruit had thin, delicate skin and shimmered like gold as light radiated from just beneath it. Even just looking at it, they all felt revitalizing warmth, like bathing in the light of dawn. I came across it, or rather it came across me, while I was looking for Auburn, Zephyrard started to explain. "I was resting in a tree, just looking up at the sky, wondering. That's when I felt a sudden breeze and I had the spiritual message. Then out of nowhere, this fruit landed on my head." Nixia's eyes were fixated on the fruit. She leaned forward. "May I have a look, Zephyrard?" said Nixia, quite intrigued. He nodded. Nixia picked up the fruit and settled back down in her seat, turning it in her hand, looking over the texture, hefting it up and down, weighing it. She held it to her nose and took a deep breath. It smelled sweet and warm, like sunny meadows. "She was successful," she muttered to herself quietly. Then, raising her head back to her company, she passed the fruit to Lunadia. "That right there is a magical ingredient, more potent and powerful than any normal ingredient. A natural ready-made potion, one could say," Nixia said, wagging a finger. She had a big smile across her face. Though, more importantly for right now, equally as delicious as powerful. Your little gift from the sky, dear Zephyrard, is a sunfruit. A sunfruit, huh? Said Lunadia. She held it to her nose and smelled it. As she let out a breath, a warm smile spread across her face. It smells so sweet and warm. I feel so comfy even just smelling it. You've done well, Zeph, Lunadia said as she squinted her eyes and looked at Zephyrard. She nodded and gave a thumbs up dramatically. I accept this offering as our dessert. Well then, give it here and I'll slice it up. Let's give it a try, Zephyrard said with a laugh. He held out his hand and she quickly passed it to him before settling on the edge of her seat in anticipation. With a knife from his bag, he started to peel it. Pulling back the delicate skin of the fruit, an even brighter glow filled the room, as if opening the curtain to a bright and shining day. It bursted with a warm and sweet aroma, with a mild hint of citrus. Luffy was entranced and jumped on the table, sauntering across whatever was in his path without a care in the world. He held up his nose to the sunfruit and sniffed it, eyes wide open. Do you want the first slice, Luffy? Here, have a taste, Zephyrard said. He carved out the first slice of the fruit, fleshy and thick pulped like an orange. The pulp was like white gold trimming around jewels of pure sunlight. He placed it down on the table for Luffy to sample. With a wiggling nose and upright ears, Luffy crouched down next to it and stuck out his tongue. He gave it a lick and then paused, tongue still sticking out of his mouth. He didn't dislike it, though he wasn't quite sure if he liked it. Everyone laughed as Luffy sat there with a vacant expression, lost in thought or perhaps empty-headed. Returning to his task, Zephyrard's delicate fingers rendered another few slices of sunfruit. Luna, Nixia, here you go. Well, we can't let Luffy have all the enjoyment. Let's dig in, said Nixia. Oh, how exciting, said Lunadia, holding the delicate slice in her hands, entranced by the shimmering juices. Cheers, said Zephyrard, giving them both a nod. They all held up their slice of sunfruit in thanks, and then took a nibble. Upon biting down on the delicate flesh of the fruit, their mouths were filled with a burst of flavorful juice. It was light and refreshing, sweet contrasted by a slight tangy tartness, bubbles of light packed to the brim with delightful tastes. They all felt a wave of warmth come over them as the fruit's glow enveloped them, like the rising dawn blanketing the land. This light is like, Lunadia began to wonder. Water to the parched, thirst-quenching salvation, Zephyrard whispered. Food to the starving, nourishing the body, Nixia replied in turn. And like hope to the lost, the dawn breaking the night, Lunadia finished. They all sat in their seats quietly, eyes closed, enjoying the light of dawn. Their thirst quenched, their bellies filled. They felt renewed and full of life, like the first spring after a long winter. Any grasping tendrils of dark worries were banished. Tranquil peace, like rolling hills bathed in sunlight, filled with song and life. There was but one word to say. Delicious. Though while they had enjoyed the sunfruit, Luffy had come to the conclusion that the little wedge of fruit would make an excellent toy, and batted it off the table before chasing after it. He jumped side to side, prancing around it, pawing at it. Then he would scoop it up into his paw, give it a lick, then wave it around, trying to get it unstuck from his little mitten. This process repeated itself until he tired himself out and he began to roll on the floor next to the slice of sunfruit, quite content. Well, I'm glad Luffy is enjoying playing with it, even if it's not to his taste, Zephyrard said, chuckling. Such a simple little fluffy, Lunadia said joyfully. While the other two watched Luffy playing, Nixia popped the rest of her slice of sunfruit into her mouth and savored its flavor. It was an uplifting and energizing little snack. Its restorative powers were beyond that which she anticipated. Though as delicious and warming as it was, she wondered. We should pack up the rest of the sunfruit. Never know when we'll need such a potent curative. Though, Lunadia, you should do some brainstorming. I'd love to see what dishes you could come up with. Lunadia took a nibble out of her slice, pushing it around her mouth as she chewed, analyzing the flavor and texture. That's a good idea. It's quite juicy, a bit like an orange, though with a more complex flavor and warmth. Perhaps a bit too moist to do much baking with it, unless... Candied, she exclaimed, her eyes twinkling at the prospect. I think this sunfruit would be really nice candied, and would make it better for travel, like a little potion gummy. That sounds good. I love gummies, Zephyrard said, finishing off his portion. Well then, it's good I had a plan. I'll be retrieving your father from the Kalian Isles and packing up a whole shipment of sunfruit. I pulled some favors and I should have a small airship ready for us in a short while. We could use some extra hands, though. I'll have to look around for some willing party members. Lunadia perked up in surprise. She knew he had a good reputation with the Guild Association, but didn't know he had that kind of influence. She wanted to hear everything about his adventures. My goodness, Zeph, did you become a social butterfly while you were training? You're gold rank now, too, right? Let me see your updated status card. Do you have an official epithet now? Easy. One thing at a time, Zephyrard said, laughing. My registered epithet is the Galeblade Knight. Huh, so it was you, Lunadia said, clapping her hands. I heard the stories. Tell me more. Nixia let out a laugh. Now, I know you're excited, but give Zephyrard some room. He's had a long journey. I'll tell you all about it tomorrow, he said with a bright smile. We'll have plenty of time to talk on our date, I suppose. His cheeks were kissed with a rosy tint. He lowered his head and started to wrap up the sunfruit. Then he passed it over to her. Here, you can hold on to it. Maybe you can try to candy it when you have a chance. Having these as condensed potions or even field snacks would be really great. I'm sure it'll come in handy. Lunadia's cheeks were burning. All her anxieties were blown away as her mind was swept up in the flames of passion. She took the fruit and placed it on her lap. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow, Zeph. Nixia leaned on the table once again. She squinted her eyes and had a big smile across her face. So how did you manage to get an airship, Zephyrard? It's not part of the Guild Association's fleet, right? Well, he scratched the back of his head, looking away. I'm no social butterfly, that's for sure. Still not that much of a talker. I suppose I've earned a bit of a reputation in Faventi. Lunadia leaned forward on the table as well, pushing the matter further with a cheeky smile. Oh? So how did you manage to get an airship? Calm down, you two, Zephyrard replied, shaking his head with a chuckle. I was simply helping people that needed help. Someone who I helped just happened to be able to help me. He shrugged, then laughed, remembering what happened. It's as simple as that, even if my contact is a bit eccentric. Adventurers always take pay for completing quests. Oh, I was taking on a lot of quests that no one else would during my training, he said with open gestures and earnest eyes. Faventi is sparsely populated, and the remote areas are less wealthy in general. They need support just like anywhere else. Lunadia's smile grew softer. She already knew, but asked anyway to hear it again. Hey, Zeph? What's the reason you always take on those kinds of quests to help those people? He placed a hand on his sword and stared at it with a smile. A better question would be, why not? We've all had our dark times in our lives. All I did was help people get back on their feet. They had lost their footing, Zephyrard said as he turned to look at her. His face was tranquil, his expression gentle. Just a gentle breeze to nudge those lost in the world towards a brighter future. A light in the dark like you all were for me. You really have grown, Zephyrard, Nixia said, placing a hand on her cheek. You've come such a long way since you first came here, after trying to protect that village on your own. Lunadia clenched her hands to her chest. We're very proud of how far you've come, Zeph. He nodded and held his sword to his chest, a gift from Lunadia's father. It's all thanks to you all. We're family. We've got to this point together, and we'll get through it together, said Zephyrard, closing his eyes and nodding. And he yawned. For now, let's rest up and do what we can, while waiting for that airship. That sounds good. I'm pretty exhausted, Lunadia said as she let out a sleepy yawn, eyes drooping. We should see what supplies we can buy in town on our date tomorrow, Zeph. I think you two should have a little outing into Crystalfront Forest as well. You'll probably have better luck gathering your own supplies, Nixia interjected. She had a sly grin on her face. I have a feeling you two will have some good luck out there. I think it'd be good to check in on the situation around Plutuvia anyways. I did point some adventurers that way for gathering healing supplies. Maybe we'll bump into them along the way. We could use the help as well. Sound good, Zeph? Nadia said, wondering with a sleepy head tilt. He nodded with a smile. Sounds perfect. I've missed adventuring with you by my side. It'll be good to get information on the situation here as well. Nadia let out a sigh. The burden that had been crushing her had lightened. Her eyes were full of light and hope now, even though she was tired. I'm glad you're both here with me now. Cafe Luna has been far too quiet. We'll get through this. Together.